Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary and Labour MP for Ilford North. Hopefully not too wet, Mr Streeting. Sorry you're having to stand there in the rain. It's a grotty day. Let's start by talking about this defection.
Don't worry, I'm undercover actually, so I'm OK.
Oh, good. Good. Let's start by talking about the defection of Dan Poulter. This intrigues me. It's giving me memories of Quintin Davies defecting to Labour in 2007. And then, lo and behold, 3 years later, he ends up with a life peerage. I'm wondering what Labour and Keir Starmer must have promised Mr Poulter in return for this defection.
Well, Dan Poulter's leaving Parliament at the general election to go back full-time to the NHS. So I think it speaks volumes that, he's not leaving the Conservative Party to save his seat. He's leaving the Conservative Party to save the NHS. And I think that there'll be millions of people, disaffected Conservative voters like Dan Poulter out there, who can see the chaos in the Conservative Party, see the failure to deliver, and are looking at the alternative. And I'd ask those people to trust the doctor, who's seen the Conservative Party up close, has seen the changed Labour Party of Keir Starmer up close, and has decided that ultimately we need a Labour government in this country to get our NHS back on its feet, to turn the economy around, and to make sure that we can look to the future with hope and optimism again. Because the Conservatives have had enough chances, enough prime ministers, and enough time now, and they've failed. Objectively, they've failed.
But obviously, him standing down wouldn't preclude him from being offered a peerage in the House of Lords. So can you categorically confirm that Labour haven't offered him a peerage or anything else?
Not that I'm aware of, and I spoke to Dan just this week. Frankly, I think he'd be a great addition, but that's certainly not my decision, and I'm not aware of such an offer.
Do you think that Labour's performance on the NHS in Wales is enough evidence to suggest that a Labour government would do better with the NHS?
Well, people can judge Labour on our record when we were last in government, the shortest waiting times, the highest patient satisfaction on record. But I don't deny, by the way, there are challenges in the NHS in Wales and in Scotland and in Northern Ireland and right across England. And what all of those countries and regions of the United Kingdom have in common is the Conservatives having been in power in Westminster. And one of the things that I often say, as the person who wants to be the next health secretary and would be the health secretary for England, is that the pledges we've made, the 2 million more appointments a year, or mental health support in every primary and secondary school in the country, or more scanners, and I could list the rest. All of those, because of the investment that goes in there, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all benefit. So I think the next Labour government will be able to create a rising tide that lifts all ships across the UK. OK,
but what's the point of devolution then, if it's all Westminster's fault that, for instance, Welsh Labour is now presiding over record high waiting lists? I mean, that's Welsh Labour's responsibility, isn't it? That's what devolution's all about.
It does give governments across the United Kingdom freedom to make their own decisions and do things their own way, but all of those governments are ultimately tied to the fiscal decisions and the economic fortunes of the country and what happens in Westminster. And that's why right across the UK you see public services under pressure, you see the NHS going through the worst crisis in its history. There are some things that the NHS in Wales does better than the NHS in England, by the way, and I think particularly about community services and community care and the care my grandmother received, for example, when she was dying late last year. I couldn't fault the district nursing team, and I thought actually she's getting better care in North Wales than she would have done if she lived in England, and I was grateful for that. But we've got to work together, and I think what the Dan Poulter defection also shows is that the Labour Party can build a big tent to unite our country in pursuing not just the public service reforms, but the economic policies our country needs. And bear in mind, as well as Dan Poulter, we've had Richard Walker, the chairman of Iceland, former Conservative, now backing Labour for business. You've got Nick Bowles, who helped David Cameron prepare for government before the 2010 election, a former Conservative minister, saying Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves offer serious leadership. So I really do think that the country is crying out for change. I hope people vote for that change at the general election, whenever the Prime Minister plucks up the courage to call it.
Are you going to have more defections then? Who else are you speaking to?
Look, I don't think Dan Poulter is the only Conservative who's been considering his future. I think what Dan Poulter's defection shows and the way in which he's been received by parliamentary colleagues is people would be very welcome to come across to the Labour Party. We want to build that big tent, and we want people, when the general election comes, to vote Labour, particularly in those tight races between Labour and the Conservatives. We're appealing to, as well as to former Conservative voters, we're also appealing to Liberal Democrat and Green voters to lend us those votes in those races. We want to work together to build the future our country needs.
Talking about the future that our country needs, I note that you have committed to keeping the triple lock on pensions. Will you keep the new defence spending pledge at 2.5% of GDP?
Well, Keir Starmer actually set out Labour's commitments 2.5% a few weeks back on the front page of the Mail, and I'm sure that had absolutely nothing at all with the Prime Minister's hasty announcement this week. I think what we do need, though, is, and actually on a really serious note here, I think if we can have a genuine cross-party consensus on 2.5%, I think not only is that the right decision for our country, I think it does a great service in sending a strong message, not just to our allies, but also to our adversaries, that no matter who's in government after the next general election, we are committed to Britain's security, to our continent's security, especially with the war raging in Ukraine, and that Britain will be a force for good in the world.
Although the man who hopes to be the next Foreign Secretary did once propose scrapping Trident. Presumably he's now changed his mind, like you've changed your mind when you now don't believe that trans women are women.
Well, as the book of Luke reminds us, God loves a repentant sinner, and a repentant sinner is worth more than the 95 people who do have nothing to repent for. Look, we are unequivocally committed to the renewal of the nuclear deterrent. And by the way, I mean, I might as well own up. When I was a student activist, I think I signed letters calling for Trident to be scrapped. And I'm really glad that the last Labour government didn't pay any attention to those troublemaking students like me, because the thing about the nuclear deterrent is not only has it worked, objectively worked, we have not seen conflict between nuclear powers as a result of that deterrent. You never know what's around the corner in this volatile and changing world. And the problem is, once you scrap it, it's hard to replace and takes time to replace. So we are unequivocally committed to keeping Trident. About that, there should be no doubt whatsoever.
It might just be worth noting that Labour did elect one of those troublemaking students as leader for many years, under whom Keir Starmer happily served, Jeremy Corbyn, but I digress. Another very quick question for you, Wes, if you don't mind. Do you think that Keir Starmer should apologise to Rosie Duffield? She was the one who was railing against this talk of trans women being women. She's had an horrendous ordeal. She says Labour have a woman problem. No one seems to be acknowledging that Rosie Duffield was right all along, wasn't she?
Look, well, firstly, I and other Labour colleagues have condemned the abuse that Rosie has received. I actually don't agree with what she said this week about the Labour Party. I mean, we should never be complacent about sexism and discrimination in politics, but you look at Labour's top team, you've got Angela Rayner, who'll be Deputy Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, who'll be Chancellor of the Exchequer, Yvette Cooper, who'll be the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who will be the Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor of our country. You look at Sue Gray, Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. Women play a big role in Labour's team and will continue to do so. And I very much hope Rosie will be part of that Labour team after the general election too. No, we've not had a woman leader yet, and I've no doubt that in my lifetime that will happen. What we do have, though, in Keir Starmer is a great alternative to Rishi Sunak. And look, I'll take you what you said about Jeremy Corbyn earlier. Jeremy Corbyn is not a Labour MP. He is not going to be a Labour candidate in the next general election, and that's because Keir Starmer showed the strength and leadership to withdraw the whip. If only Rishi did that with some of the people in his party who are beyond the pale. But the difference is Keir's a strong leader with a mandate. Rishi Sunak is a weak politician who is out of control of his party.
All right, well, he withdrew the whip after working with and for Jeremy Corbyn for 4 years in shadow cabinet, Mr Streeting, but I take your point. It's a new and changed Labour Party, is what you're saying.
Yep, absolutely. I just don't think there's any doubt about that now. And and we all tried to influence the Labour Party as best we could during those years. Some of us outside the tent, people like Keir inside the tent, but I've no doubt about where Keir's politics are, where his convictions are, and you know, thank goodness he was in the tent, because things could have been worse, and thank goodness he's leading the Labour Party now, because it's unrecognisable from the party that was rejected in 2019, and that's why I think lots of GBNews viewers are looking to Labour. We'll continue to come on your programmes, continue to make our case, and work really hard to win the trust of your viewers, because we want your support of the general election.
Well, we'll happily give you the trust of the viewers and the listeners if Keir Starmer actually agreed to come on my show. Perhaps you can have a word with him, Mr Streeting, as we always enjoy our exchanges, don't we?
I will put in a recommendation, Camilla. I bet he'd love to come and be interviewed by you, but I'll pass that on.
All right, good man. Thank you very much, Wes Streeting. Lovely to speak to you this morning.
Thanks very much.